Rain fell hard over Braedenville. Not the gentle kind. This was a downpour, loud enough to drown your thoughts, sharp enough to sting skin. Water dripped from the corners of rusted awnings, pooled along the cracked sidewalks, and bled into the gutters like the city was bleeding out its secrets. In the back of a dim, oil-stained garage, a woman moved with silent precision, socket wrench in hand. Grease streaked across her forearms. No name tag on her overalls. Just faded fabric and calloused hands. Her name was Reva Lane. To most, she was just the quiet mechanic who never spoke unless she had to. People said she lived in her workshop. No one knew where she came from. No one asked. They wouldn't have believed the answer anyway. At 9:13 a.m., a scream shattered the silence outside. Reva stood still. Wrench half-tightened on a distributor cap. The scream came again. Older voice. Female. Cracked with fear. Reva dropped the wrench. She moved quickly but without panic. Through the rain. Past the rusted chain-link fence. Toward the small corner store across the street. Two men stood over an elderly woman near the dumpster. One had her by the wrist. The other was shouting. Both wore the gray windbreakers of Braedenville code enforcement, an unholy merger of zoning compliance and unaccountable muscle. "You can't find me for feeding strays," the old woman yelled, struggling. The taller enforcer raised a hand. "You want to go to holding?" That's when Reva stepped between them. No warning. No words. The man flinched. She didn't touch him. Just looked at him. Dead center in his eyes. He tried to speak, but his voice caught. "Walk away," Reva said quietly. The shorter one laughed nervously. "You threatening us?" "No," she replied. "I'm giving you a chance." Something in her voice made them hesitate. Something cold. Measured. The taller one let go. Muttered something. They left fast, disappearing into the rain like shadows. The old woman, Matilda Cross, was shaking. "Thank you, dear. What's your name?" Reva just nodded once and helped her gather her bags. She didn't see the squad car pull up behind her. Deputy Halford didn't bother asking questions. He grabbed her arm and slapped cuffs on her before she could blink. "Obstruction of city officers. That's a felony." Matilda screamed again. "She was protecting me." Halford shoved Reva into the cruiser. "Tell it to the judge." The rain kept falling. The Braedenville Sheriff's Office was a dying structure. Mold behind the tiles, mildew in the vents, and a heart of rot in the center. Sheriff Doyle Ashburn ran it like a private empire. His badge gleamed, but his soul was stained with backroom deals and selective enforcement. "Who is she?" Ashburn asked, flipping through a thin file. "No ID," Halford said. "Goes by Reva. Lives behind a mechanic shop. Real quiet. Prince." Came back blank. Ashburn raised an eyebrow. "That never happened. No priors. No history. No license, registration, tax record. Like a ghost." "You arrest a ghost, deputy?" Ashburn asked dryly. Halford shifted nervously. "She stepped in where she shouldn't have. Same attitude as the rest of those damn vets." Ashburn's expression darkened. "Braedenville doesn't need vigilantes. Especially not the war-damaged kind." He made a call. To someone uptown. 20 minutes later, Reva sat in a holding cell. Silent. Unflinching. She didn't ask for a phone call. Didn't ask for a lawyer. Didn't ask for anything. That night, across the state, a retired four-star general answered a private number that hadn't rung in years. "Sloan Everett," he said. A voice on the other end was tense. "Sir, it's Major Rusk. You need to see something." An encrypted file appeared on his screen. A mugshot. Black and white. Grainy. But Everett didn't need a clear photo to recognize the face. His pulse stopped. "Staff Sergeant Reva Lane," he whispered. "The woman who had saved his life in Balakot, deep behind enemy lines. The one whose shot had ended a 3-day siege. The sniper whose kill count was classified above top secret. What happened? Arrested yesterday. Local authorities. Some deputy who didn't know who she was." If you're enjoying this story, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. It is free and won't cost anything, but it means the world to us. We're just a small channel trying to grow. Thank you, and back to the video. Everett was already out of his chair, reaching for a locked drawer. "Get the car ready." At 10:04 a.m. the next morning, Sheriff Ashburn stood face to face with General Sloan Everett in the lobby of the station. The general didn't bother shaking hands. "You have my soldier in custody." Ashburn narrowed his eyes. "We don't give special treatment, General." Everett stepped forward. "You already did. You targeted her. Because she didn't bow to your thugs." Ashburn glanced at Halford. She interfered with a lawful city action. Everett dropped a thick folder on the counter. That woman has 3 silver stars, a Purple Heart, and the Medal of Honor. You put her in cuffs for protecting a grandmother from intimidation. Halford blinked. She never mentioned that. She shouldn't have to, Everett growled. She doesn't owe you her life story. Ashburn reached for the folder, but Everett pulled it back. These documents are already at the Pentagon, and I've alerted every major outlet in the state. I'd suggest you let her go before this turns into a goddamn civil rights scandal. Ashburn looked pale, but it wasn't over yet. By noon, the lobby was full. Matilda Cross arrived with her daughters. One carried a folder marked City Hall Records. Another held a USB drive. They weren't alone. Beside them stood Thad Rohn, a civil rights attorney whose reputation for taking down police departments was legendary. I've got evidence of illegal arrests, civil forfeiture abuses, and emails between this office and Garrison Engineering. All of it targeting veterans who live on condemned land, Rohn announced. And it starts with Reva Lane. Halford tried to deflect. You can't just barge in here. I can, Rohn snapped, when I'm filing a federal injunction against this department. Matilda's daughter pressed play on a recording. Ashburn's voice came through. Arrest her. I don't care who she is. We need that land clear for the Garrison bid. Silence. Dead silence. Rohn turned to Everett. We can prove he's been working with Garrison execs to jail veterans living on targeted parcels. Reva was just the latest. Ashburn's face turned to ash. Halford looked like he was about to vomit. Get out, Ashburn barked. All of you. This is fabricated. Reva appeared then, brought in by a young officer who looked more shaken than hostile. Her wrists were red from the cuffs, but her eyes, those stayed steady. Everett looked at her. Sergeant Lane, I apologize for what you've endured. Reva's voice was calm. I've endured worse, sir, but it's not me they need to apologize to. Rohn stepped forward. Sheriff Ashburn, you're being served. Multiple counts. Civil rights violations. Federal charges pending. Ashburn's hand twitched. He almost reached for his belt. Reva didn't flinch. Don't. It won't end well. For a long moment, time froze. Then the general spoke. It's over, Doyle. Ashburn didn't move. But his world had already collapsed. That night, the Braedenville News ran the headline. War hero arrested in veteran crackdown scandal. Reva didn't watch the news. She sat in her shop, cleaned her tools, listened to the distant sound of sirens. She didn't smile, didn't celebrate, but something inside her shifted. And across town, someone watched her through a grainy surveillance feed. A man in a dark office. Next to him, a file. Not just hers, dozens. Photos, names, military records. Reva Lane had just exposed a piece of the truth. But the real war? It hadn't even started. The station was silent. Sheriff Doyle Ashburn's face, once smug, now drained of color. General Sloan Everett's voice echoed, each word a hammer blow. Staff Sergeant Reva Lane, Medal of Honor, Silver Star, Purple Heart. Deputy Halford shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting between Reva and the general. You arrested a war hero for helping an elderly woman? Everett's gaze was icy. Reva stood tall, her expression unreadable. The room held its breath. Thad Rohn stepped forward, a folder in hand. Evidence of systemic targeting of veterans, he announced. Recordings, documents, all pointing to a coordinated effort to discredit and detain those who've served. Ashburn's hands trembled as he reached for the folder. Inside, pages detailed transactions, communications, and patterns too precise to be coincidence. Matilda Cross, the elderly woman Reva had aided, entered with her daughters. One held up a recording device. Conversations with city officials, she said. Proof of collusion between the sheriff's office and certain business interests. The walls seemed to close in on Ashburn. His deputies exchanged uneasy glances. Everett turned to Reva. Your silence spoke volumes. But now the truth shouts. Reva nodded. I didn't seek recognition. Just justice. Suddenly, a commotion outside. A group of veterans, news crews, and concerned citizens gathered, demanding accountability. Inside, Ashburn was led away in cuffs. His reign ended not with a bang, but a whimper. But as Reva stepped outside, a note was pressed into her hand. Unfolding it, her eyes narrowed. The roots run deeper. Trust no one. The battle was far from over. If you're enjoying this story, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. It is free and won't cost anything, but it means the world to us. We're just a small channel trying to grow. Thank you, and back to the video. The courtroom fell silent. Everyone's eyes turned to the door. Deputy Wexler stood there, bruised, battered, and barely able to hold himself upright. Blood stained the edge of his collar, and a shaky hand clutched the side of the wooden frame, like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "Your Honor," he croaked, voice raw. "I have evidence." Gasps rippled through the room like aftershocks. Sheriff Doyle Ashburn turned an impossible shade of gray. Reva Lane didn't flinch. Judge Arliss banged her gavel. Order. But nothing about this moment felt orderly. Not the tension. Not the faces. Not the truth. Wexler stumbled forward, dropping a torn envelope onto the prosecution's table. This was supposed to disappear. Inside, a USB drive and a series of bank slips. Ashburn's signature. Dates matching every arrest of a veteran over the last 2 years. Wexler met Reva's eyes, then lowered his gaze. "I was part of it, but I didn't know the full cost. Not until someone tried to kill me." The courtroom erupted. Judge Arliss demanded silence. Ashburn stood, furious. "This is absurd. He's delirious." "Sit down, Sheriff," the judge ordered. But Ashburn didn't move. Instead, he whispered something to his attorney, who immediately stood and requested a recess. Request denied. Too late. The rot had been exposed. That night, Reva couldn't sleep. She sat in her truck, parked outside Matilda Cross's home. Her eyes scanned the shadows, heart still pounding from the day's chaos. She replayed Wexler's words again and again. "Someone tried to kill me." Who? Why now? She didn't trust coincidences, especially not ones wrapped in blood. Her phone buzzed. It was Thad Roan. "They're moving Ashburn," he said. "Feds are taking over the case." Reva watched a shadow cross the window of Matilda's home. She tensed, then relaxed. "Just a cat." "Did Wexler say who tried to kill him?" she asked. A pause. Then, "He said it wasn't just about the veterans." "What does that mean?" "He didn't say. Only that Ashburn was just a piece. A front." Reva's grip tightened on the steering wheel. The next morning, national news swarmed Braedenville. Cameras. Microphones. Questions. The Department of Justice had officially opened a probe into citywide veteran discrimination. More than a dozen businesses were under investigation. Several council members had quietly resigned overnight. But Reva didn't celebrate. She met with General Everett in the back of her garage. He brought documents, sealed, confidential. "What is this?" she asked. He didn't sit. "I went digging," he said. Braedenville wasn't random. She raised a brow. "You think they picked this town because of the base?" He shook his head. "They picked it because of you." Reva blinked. "What?" Everett handed her a dossier. Inside were surveillance photos. Her. From years ago. Post-deployment. Working on cars. Grocery shopping. Sitting at a bus stop. Always watching. Never noticed. She flipped through. Then froze. One image showed Ashburn meeting with a man in a suit. Captioned, "Bradley Mern, former intelligence contractor. Disavowed." "He knew who I was?" Reva whispered. Everett nodded grimly. "They were baiting you." Reva's pulse thundered in her ears. "They wanted me to snap. To fight back. So they could bury me." Everett's face darkened. "But you didn't." The news exploded. Wexler testified before a federal committee. Matilda Cross released her recordings. Thad Roan filed a class action lawsuit against Braedenville on behalf of more than 30 veterans. The city shook. And yet, Reva felt none of it was over. Late one evening, as she closed up her workshop, she found a letter on her desk. No postage. No return address. Inside, "You've made too much noise. Step away, or they won't just come for you. They'll come for your people." No signature. Just a symbol. A black triangle with a dagger through it. She'd seen it before. Years ago. On a compound wall in Kandahar. On crates that never made the manifest. On bodies that didn't exist. The Blacklatch Unit. Covert. Ruthless. Erased from every official record. Reva sat back. This wasn't just a crooked sheriff. This was a system. Weeks passed. Ashburn was indicted on 12 federal charges. Mern vanished. The FBI had no trace. Wexler entered witness protection. Reva turned her workshop into a refuge for veterans under pressure. More arrived weekly. Some homeless. Some broken. All scared. She trained them. Taught them. Protected them. But she also gathered stories. Patterns. And names. Names that connected companies to arrests. Contracts to false reports. Developers to judges. There was a network, nationwide. They weren't just clearing land for profit. They were targeting veterans because veterans resist. Disciplined, trained, unpredictable, Reva told Everett during another meeting. They fear what they can't control. Then came the explosion. One night, just after midnight, a building 2 blocks from Reva's garage went up in flames. It was empty. No injuries. But it had once housed files from the Department of Veteran Services. Files subpoenaed 3 days earlier. Arson. No doubt. Reva knew. She was next. She moved her team underground. Split files. Sent backups to encrypted drives in 4 states. The media framed the fire as coincidence. She knew better. And then the real hit came. Matilda Cross disappeared. Gone. No sign of struggle. No calls. No ransom. Just silence. Reva stood in the ruins of Matilda's home. Cup of tea still warm. Photos on the walls untouched. But the old woman was gone. It was personal. There was no doubt now. The message was clear. Stop digging. Or start burying. She didn't stop. General Everett pulled strings. Hard ones. He secured a high-level briefing in Washington. Reva presented everything. Photos. Testimonies. Financial trails. And the symbol. The black latch triangle. The room went cold. The Secretary of Defense excused everyone except Reva and Everett. Then he leaned forward. That unit doesn't exist, he said. Then why did it warn me? Reva replied. He didn't answer. Back in Braedenville, things fell apart fast. For more arrests tied to the sheriff's office were overturned. Lawsuits rained down. Construction deals vanished. Ashburn's co-conspirators were named. Most fled. Some didn't. One, a judge, was found dead in his home. Gunshot. No suspects. The city bled truth now. But not enough. Matilda was still missing. And Reva was still a target. Then one night, a flash drive arrived at the garage. Unmarked. Wrapped in a cloth embroidered with Matilda's initials. Reva locked the door. Plugged it in. What she saw dropped her to her knees. Video footage. Matilda. Bound. But alive. Speaking directly into the camera. They want you to stop, Reva. They're using me to force your silence. But don't. Please don't. There's more. Look into the files under Borealis Protocol. You'll find them. Static. Then the triangle symbol. And a timer. The drive began wiping itself. Reva yanked it. Only partial files survived. But she had what she needed. That night, she called Everett. We're going bigger, she said. How big? Congressional hearing. Do you have proof? She stared at the last intact file. An email. Between Mern and a federal contractor. Subject, Phase 2 targets. Her name was at the top of the list. Below hers, 32 others. All veterans. All arrested in suspicious ways. All now missing. Yeah, she said quietly. I've got proof. The next week was war. Not bullets, but subpoenas. Files. Leaks. Testimonies. Reva didn't eat. Barely slept. Every day brought a new name. A new survivor. A new piece of the puzzle. Black Latch wasn't just operating. It was feeding from contracts inside the justice system. Turning soldiers into targets. Turning profit into motive. Turning silence into survival. Until Reva spoke. When the congressional hearing opened, the country watched. Reva sat alone at the witness table. Wore no uniform. Only a simple shirt. Sleeves rolled. Scars visible. State your name, the chairman said. She did. And your profession? She paused. Then answered, mechanic. And soldier. She laid out everything. From Ashburn to the fires. From Matilda's warning to the Black Latch's name. Faces in the chamber turned pale. They didn't count on one thing, she concluded. What's that? The chairman asked. That veterans don't just fight. We endure. Reva walked out of the chamber to thunderous applause. She didn't smile. Not yet, because the war wasn't over. But it was exposed. 3 months later, Matilda Cross was found in an abandoned warehouse in rural Louisiana. Tied. Weak. But alive. Her first words? Took you long enough. Reva didn't answer. She just hugged her. And whispered, You gave me the fire. Black Latch was now on record. Its contractors blacklisted. Investigations opened in 8 states. And Reva? She rebuilt. Her garage became Lane Veterans Collective. 5 buildings. Housing. Employment. Training. Not charity, strategy. Justice made real. On the anniversary of the day she was arrested, Reva stood on stage before a crowd of 6,000 veterans. They cheered. She raised her hand, waited for silence, then said, "I wasn't meant to survive this. I was meant to disappear. But I didn't, because injustice has a flaw. It forgets who it's up against. And if you think a mechanic can't start a revolution..." She raised a wrench in the air. "Then you never served with me." Applause. Thunderous. And far in the shadows, a figure watched. Suit. Earpiece. Black triangle on the lapel. He didn't clap. He turned, walked away, and dropped a single envelope marked Phase 3. Inside, a photo of Reva, and a list of names below hers. A new list. Targets unknown,